Hello and welcome to the Souled Career. This is the next episode with another great guest today. Jenny Whichello, welcome so much to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I would right away give you the space. I would love for you if you could give our listeners a short introduction.
Yeah, sure. So I am a mindful money coach, and I can describe and further what that means. But prior to doing coaching, I was a CFO for about 16 years for a number of fashion startups. First in New York, and then I moved down to Virginia, which is where I live now, and led a couple of companies down here. I won an award in 2019 for being the CFO of the year for the state of Virginia. And that was sort of a turning point in my own personal career where I thought, well, now where do I go from here? I kind of felt like I had explored everything there was in that realm of my life and my career, and really started to get the pull to do coaching. And that's what I do today. So I take a unique approach to money coaching because I do have a background in certified financial planning. So I understand the core foundational principles of financial planning, but I also have a really in-depth knowledge of your mindset, how your emotions and your thoughts drive your behaviors around money. And so what I do as a coach is I blend those two together. So I don't just help women with their money mindset and, adopting the belief that they're worthy of abundance and worthy of living the most grandiose vision of their life that they can come up with. But I also do the tactical piece of it, which is help them break that vision down into achievable goals and then figure out how they're going to start to work towards those goals, given their current reality of what their cash flow and, their income level looks like. So I sort of bridge those two together. So typically there's someone who might do mindset coaching and someone who might do financial planning, and I'm bringing them together for women.
I love that. And I have a very similar approach to career coaching because I find it not fully complete when you only take really one side of a picture, but instead when you really look at the whole thing holistically. Because whatever it is, whether it's a money habit or money spending habit, right? You think it's just like, yeah, you didn't do enough budgeting, but then you realize that it's connected to that one story that you heard in childhood, and here we go. It influences your whole life.
Absolutely. I call it the perpetual cycle, because those thoughts become your beliefs over time, which drive your behaviors, which become habitual or habits, right? Which produce your financial results or lack thereof. And then you have more thoughts and emotions about that. And it continues and it continues and it continues. And people tend to look outside for tips and tricks and quick tactical solutions to a problem that really requires you to start right back at the beginning, which is what's going on in your mind.
Right. And how, when you meet a woman like that and she signs up for a coaching with you, what stage of the mind are they usually in the moment when they already make the decision to start working on it?
Yeah, I think most of the clients that I work with have what we call a scarcity mindset. So they don't believe there's enough money. They're fixated on what they're lacking, and not all of the blessings that they have. And oftentimes they can't even, they're so blinded by the one thing that they're so focused on that they ignore, they're blind to everything else that's really actually going really well for them. Typically they have debt, as most Americans do, but they feel a lot of shame around it. And that tipping point for them is, I think a lot of it has to do with social media and looking and seeing people that appear to be living the life that they want for themselves. And, I think they get to a breaking point where they realize that they've tried all these tips and tricks. They've created a million budget spreadsheets. They've put cash in an envelope. They've done all these like wacky things. And nothing sticks. Nothing has been sticky. And I also think a part of why people come to coaches is, or when they know that they're ready to come to a coach, is when they're ready to have accountability. When they've tried to be accountable for themselves and they recognize that they need the additional support there.
That's very good. I can definitely relate to that. And there's definitely a part, I feel like in the moment when you start dipping your toes overall in topic of self-improvement, right? Whatever is the real topic of it. And you might read some books, you might listen to some podcasts, you know, kind of like start to get some of the knowledge. But if you're not fully ready to commit to it, you're gonna think of like, coach is a waste of time, money, and so on. And then you really need to get to the space when like, okay, I'm ready to actually fully go for it and to choose myself, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and a lot of the folks that I work with, you know, they went to who they thought they, you know, typically they should go to, which is a financial advisor, or even in some instances a certified financial planner, and they found that the door was kind of slammed in their face because those folks really want to work with someone who already has some significant amount of assets that they can manage, right? They're not really interested in helping you figure out how to get out of debt, or helping you deal with the negative thought patterns that you have around money. They don't want to deal with you if you have that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, I think there are a lot of people in those service fields, but very few, I can probably count on one hand how many I personally know that actually will work with the clients that I work with. And that's a shame, because this is where the real need lies. You know, I got into doing this because I believe that to change the world, we need to get more money in the hands of women. And you know, how can we do that if the experts won't work with them? You know, and so I think that there's a opportunity for coaches to really step up and fill that void. And that's the driver for me, and I want to do it by bringing in all of the financial expertise that I have and giving that value to them as well.
This is amazing. I love it. Was there something specific in your life that brought you to this realization that you want to be working with women and empowering them financially?
You know, not anything specific for me personally, but in my family tree, I mean, I come from both my parents grew up pretty poor in Alabama, and my mother's family, they were farmers. And in doing my own research of my family tree, I realized how difficult their lives were, particularly for the women. And that you know, my grandmother, my grandfather died in a car accident when my mom was 5, and here's this woman in Alabama with this farm, with an 8th grade education, and now 2 children to raise, and money was a constant stress and struggle. And so I feel like to some extent that's in my blood, if that makes sense. This idea that women have a struggle because they don't have the resources that they need. And so that's probably part of the driver for me. Although I did have a incident that happened last Tuesday that really brought it home for me, why I'm doing this. I was sitting here at my desk and I heard this car screech. I live on essentially what's a main street of a little town that I live in here. And I heard this car screech to a halt outside my office here. And I ran to the window to look out, because my first thought was somebody hit my car, because our car is typically parked out there, but my husband had taken it. And so I went outside and I looked out the window first, and I saw this car door open, and I saw a woman and a small child get pushed out of this vehicle. And then I saw all their belongings being thrown out of the car at them. And so they're on the grass out in front of my house. She's crying. The child is scared. So I run out there, and long story short, they were home. It was a homeless woman and her child, 4-year-old child. And that was her apparent boyfriend. And he had just dumped them literally on the side of the street, and they had nowhere to go. They had no money. They had no means of transportation. They had no food. They had their only belongings fit in a little plastic bucket, and it was toiletries and diapers. The child was still in diapers. And so I, ushered them to my house, and I figured out where they needed to go and how to get them the help that they needed. But to see a woman and a child in tears in a moment of desperation and having no monetary resources really drove home for me that, like, in the year 2023 in the United States, we should not have this.
Wow, this is, what's interesting about this, and I don't know if it's because I'm a woman that I can relate to it, even though I've never lived a situation like that, Yet you can realize how easily you can get into a situation like that. And it's actually really scary.
Yeah.
That really, when you feel so disempowered just by the thought of it, and thought that you don't have the financial security to just take your stuff and go somewhere.
Exactly. And I thought after that, after they left my house and I had gotten them situated, why did that happen right in front of my window? You know, and I think sometimes the universe sends us signs to tell us, like, yes, you are exactly doing what you should be doing right now. Like, this is the purpose that you are put here, and this is the impact that you're supposed to have. And so that to get back to your original question, that's one example of many times in the past few years since I've started doing this work that it's been reiterated back to me that there's a reason, you know, because sometimes we can get in the mode as coaches of the doing, the onboarding new clients, the helping people, the, like, you know, getting them the transformation and then offboarding them and starting the cycle back again. And we get into the mode of doing, and we forget to step back and realize that we're actually ushering in a bigger change here than the working individually with these people that were actually almost to some extent part of a movement.
Yeah, yeah. Especially now, imagine that this woman or any woman that you specifically work with, then as they change their own mindset about that, and then they raise their children, the ripple effect of this is huge.
Exactly. Yep.
And just the fact that you no longer participate in certain conversations already is a huge change.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Totally. Yep.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, I've seen with my clients the transformation that they go through, where they come to me with this deep scarcity mindset and this belief that the best they can do is just get by and keep their head above water. To see them transform into someone who surfaces this amazing vision for their life and then wholeheartedly believes that they're worthy of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then build a plan that helps them get there. And then they start to make progress, and they have momentum throughout this process. But then when they start to actually take action that starts to make that vision come to fruition, I won't say they've completed the transformation, because I think transformation is like a constant process for us all, but they're a different person over 8 weeks. And then they go out into the world and they're more optimistic and they're better leaders. I work with a lot of women who are leaders and people managers, right? And so imagine the impact they're having when they're not going to work and bringing all the stress that they have around money with them, right? Imagine the relationships that they have with their partners and with their children, because they don't have that burden. And instead they're focused on, because they fostered an abundance mindset, they're fixated not on lack, they're fixated on, look at this over here and look at that over here and look at all these amazing things I have to be grateful for. And I'm a firm believer that what you focus on grows, right? We've all heard that 100 times. What you focus on grows. And it is absolutely true. And so when they go out, you know, after working with me and they have that mindset, it spreads. I'll just put it that way. It spreads to your immediate surroundings, because the people that you interact with can't help but be influenced by the new approach that you have to life.
Yes, especially I would highlight that they cannot help but have to be influenced. I've witnessed this so many times from my personal experience, and just seeing the people already were transformed, and then you realize the family dynamic changes, the dynamic in their team at work changes, and it's huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you were talking about the scarcity mindset, when the women come to you and you really feel like they don't feel worthy, does this feeling of unworthiness often comes from like similar experiences, or you feel like it varies completely?
I think it varies completely. I mean, the one common thread is it often comes from early childhood, right? Because our subconscious is sort of implanted with all of these thoughts and beliefs by the time we're about the age of 7. And scientists believe that 95% of the action that we take today is driven by our subconscious. So if you believe both of those then you believe that a lot of the decisions you're making, particularly on finance, are being made by the 7-year-old version of yourself. Now, what people's childhoods look different, right? But for me, one of my the way scarcity mindset manifested or was made apparent in my life was in the realm of eating. So when I was a child, like, it was kind of drilled into me to eat all of your food, like, don't leave any food on your plate, right? And so even as an adult, I would eat every single crumb, even if I wasn't hungry. And it took me a really long time to realize that, like, I'm not actually an overeater. I'm a clean plate clubber. Like, I believe that you cannot waste food. And that has to do with this idea that there's not enough food to go around, right? And so, and I'm not saying that isn't true in some areas of the world, but just having that realization that, oh, this is how scarcity mindset is manifesting for me. It's manifesting in eating, right? And so I think everybody comes to my program with a different set of beliefs that were mainly driven there by their childhoods and what they experienced. Some of my clients grew up in poverty. So even as they become adults and they're making 6 figures and they've got these successful careers, they're still a child living in poverty inside and making decisions like that. Others grew up middle class, but never felt like they were meeting the expectations. Like the bar was still even higher. So never satisfied. I might make, $400,000 a year, but I still don't have enough, and so, I think the value that we add as coaches is understanding where people are and meeting them where they're at, listening intently and understanding that coaching is not a one size fits all. Like, I have a program, a lot of coaches have a program, but when you come to work with me, I'm going to modify that program to meet you where you are and give you the level of support that you need. And I do often modify the exercises given what someone's particular challenges are.
Mm-hmm. And you were mentioning that obviously because of your expertise in finance, you then can help them even like help with budgets and everything that's included, like kind of like the technical part of it, if I should call it this way. But when it comes to like percentage, how much would you say is this part and then all the limiting beliefs part and all of this?
Yeah. So my program is a 3-part program. So with coaching, it typically can happen over 8 weeks if we're meeting every week. The first phase of the program is explore, and that's where we're mostly doing. I'd say 2/3 of that is what I call the inner work of money, which is diving deep into the thoughts and the beliefs, and then the habits, the behaviors and rituals around money that are directly related to those thoughts and beliefs. And then the last 1/3 of that first phase is looking at your current financial results. So, my clients are asked to pull all of their financial data together. We analyze it. I run some metrics. We sit there and we digest that information, and then we try to connect the dots. How do your financial results, the end result here, tie back to those behaviors, those habits, and how do they then tie back to the thoughts and the beliefs? So people can have that linkage. They can understand that linkage between those. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is about starting to rework all of that, right? So we've surfaced what those limiting beliefs are. Phase 2, we're going to rewrite those beliefs. We're going to decide on healthy rituals around money. A lot of my clients, they don't even look at their bank statements. They're so ashamed to look at their debt balances, et cetera. So we're going to untease those behaviors and adopt better behaviors. And then the last part of phase 2 is visioning. So this is where, before we run off and set goals, which in my opinion, the reason people fail at goals and resolutions is because they're not tied to anything. They're not meaningful. To create meaningful goals, you need to have a vision. And so the last part of phase 2 is surfacing that vision for your life, not just 30 years from now when you're ready to retire, but like right now, like, what do you want to be doing a year from now? Like, where are you? Like, how do you look? How do you feel? What are you doing? Who are you with? Surfacing that. Then we move into phase 3, which is majority the financial planning tactical piece of this, which is taking that vision, breaking it down into intentions and goals, looking at those goals, because a vision might not have anything to do with money. You know, your vision may be to like, I don't change jobs or something, but we look at what that vision is and we try to strip out what are the financial components of it. Okay, maybe changing careers might involve you hiring a resume writer, or a career, I don't know, someone that helps you do a job search. So we try to tease out what are the financial components of all of that vision, break those out into goals, and then we run the numbers. And this is where more of the financial planning concepts around time value of money come into play. So projecting out into the future, if you have a goal, you want to buy a house in 10 years from now, you want to save to have $50,000 in a down payment. Let's figure out how much you actually need to be saving today and investing so that you have that amount when that day comes. So we run those numbers, and then then we do what I call painless trade-offs, which is, okay, we have the vision, we have the goals, we know how much it's going to cost. How do we make that work with your current cash flow? And at this point in the process, the clients are so obsessed with the vision that often when we go back and look at the cash flow and we look at what they had been spending money on, those things don't mean anything to them anymore. I don't need to go shopping every weekend because like I'm like so obsessed with this vision of buying this house in 10 years that I actually want to put my money towards that. So we do what I call painless trade-offs, which is we look at that cash flow and we say, okay, to save for this house, you need to be saving $50 a month. Let's look at your cash flow and figure out where that $50 is going to come from. Where is it going to be painless? Because I don't do budgets. That's one thing that's unique about my program. I don't believe that budgets are necessary. And I think they almost feed a scarcity mindset in a lot of ways. So we make those painless trade-offs. And then we build what I call an effortless system, which is let's automate all of this. So every dollar that comes into your financial ecosystem here goes immediately to work for one of these goals. It's the first thing that happens. The money goes to work for one of these goals. And then we have 2 buckets, one of which is for your living expenses, your bills, right? Or your debt payments, et cetera. And the other bucket is for whatever in the world you want to spend it on. You're the only one that has to be accountable for what you spend that money on. And in lieu of doing budgets, I ask my clients to monitor those 2 buckets. Monitor those 2 buckets every week. You have, I'm making up numbers here, $1,000 of spending money in a month. If you're down to 500 after week 1, you need to make some adjustments for the remainder of the month. But once people get into the routine of this process, looking at their money for 10 minutes every week is sufficient enough. They don't need to have some crazy detailed budget and be worrying about whether they've spent too much on Starbucks this week and now they need to cut back. That's not effortless to me. And that, in my opinion, creates more stress for people. And when money becomes stressful, people stop dealing with it. And I don't want to see any of my clients go through this whole process and this whole transformation only to get frustrated and give up because it was too tedious. And so that's why I don't do budgets. And I have proven at this point that it's unnecessary because of the successes that I've had.
Hey, I just want to thank you for listening. And as a thank you for being here, I would like to offer you a free mini course called Get That Job. Now let's have a look of what is inside of this course. So first, we actually want to even get you to an interview. So we're going to learn about how to write a winning CV and how to write a cover letter if you choose to do so. Then we're going to have a look into how to actually act on an interview. We're going to go through some basics. We're going to talk about overall the mindset of being on an interview. And then of course, we're going to have a look into some commonly asked job interview questions and how to actually answer them appropriately. And last but not least, topic that I love to teach about on how to actually discuss the salary. So the salary talk can be can get super strange and super awkward. And sometimes it's from the side of a candidate, and other times it's from the side of a person who is recruiting you. So how are we going to discuss this topic without it necessarily being awkward? Because it's just money. Money is just energy, right? Let's get to it. Let's talk about it. And please, if you decide to do so, this is also like a welcome from me to my world and to the way how I coach on career. If you want to access this course, make sure to check the show notes for the link. And I will be looking forward to see you on the inside. Okay, enjoy the rest of the episode. This is so good. It's such a beautiful blend of the masculine and feminine approach. Really putting it together, because it is important that we have both of these approaches. And even when you were talking about, again, like suddenly coming back to the scarcity and so on, I had this memory popped up when I had some bills coming in, and I started at some point, because I started to have this, again, at this moment, I didn't realize where it was rooted from, but I started to really have this inner feeling of like, I'm so scared to open it, because once I open the letter, I need to pay it. And if I pay it, what if I then don't have money more coming in? Then they're taking away my money from me, right? And at some point, I had stocked up gigantic pile of envelopes. And there was a day when I suddenly was like, I'm tired of this. I'm going to go and open it all and figure it out. Once I opened it, I realized that more than half of them I have already paid electronically. Another half of the second half was just a letter about information. There was nothing important in it. But the huge buildup behind that of the fear was crazy, even though it was almost nothing. And so it was interesting that then, and I would be curious if you then could give an example of some of these rituals that you were talking about, because what I started doing in that moment when I was like, oh shit, I have such a negative feeling connected just to an envelope, that every time when I got a bill, I started like kind of like gathering the feeling of gratitude of like, oh my God, thank you so much that I can be using the electricity. Like if you didn't provide it to me, I don't know what I would be doing. And I started really doing these types of rituals around it to really heal it. I'm wondering if you have an example of a ritual that you would start with a client.
Yeah. So I was very similar. I hated opening my bills. And I would do the same thing. I would let them pile up. And even the exercise of sitting there and writing out my bills, and this is like back in the day when people wrote checks for stuff, I dreaded it. And when I did my own inner work around money, I realized that because when I was a child, I remember my mom sitting at the kitchen table once a month paying the bills, and it was this exercise she dreaded, and she looked miserable doing it, and it was like so stressful. And that was in my subconscious, this idea that like paying your bills is not a pleasant exercise. And so to your point, exactly what you just described, which is the ability for us to pay our bills, is something to be incredibly grateful for. It's actually an exercise we should look forward to. Now, I have taken this perspective of I want to make my money management as effortless as possible. So I automate all of my bill pay, and I monitor. My ritual is I don't pay any bills unless it's like some random medical bill that comes in. Everything is paid automatically when it's due from a dedicated bank account. And then what I do on a monthly basis, my ritual is I go and I look at the amounts that came out of that bank account, and I make sure they're consistent with the amounts from the prior month. And if they're inconsistent, then I go and dig into that bill, and I want to figure out why it was different. Why did the gas bill go up, 50% from the prior month, right? But beyond that, I don't worry about bills anymore. I have clients that often they've developed their own rituals, and they haven't even realized that they have these rituals. And, for example, I will have clients that have, that are so fixated on their credit card debt that they have that number posted somewhere, and they look at it every day, all day, and they fixate on that debt number. Wow. And then when I look at their whole financial picture, I realize that debt is a very small percent, and they have this like, nice net worth over here, and they have like these nice savings and investment balances, but that's not even visible to them because they're so fixated on this one number. They've developed that ritual of looking at that number every single day. I have other clients who keep a list of everything that they've wasted money on. And that's the ritual, is to fixate on the things that I've wasted money on, and so that I don't make those mistakes again. And so what I try to do is flip those rituals backwards. Okay, instead of fixating on the amount that you have in debt, I want you every week to look at your whole net worth statement. I want you every week to look at your whole picture. Instead of fixating on all this list of mistakes that you've made financially, I want you to start generating a list of all the good decisions that you've made, right? And let's focus on those. So oftentimes people develop their own rituals, and the rituals are they just need to be flipped around. But I do think rituals around money are very important because they reinforce certain beliefs. And so if you have rituals that reinforce your negative beliefs, then you're just going to generate more of those results, right? So if your ritual is looking at a list of financial mistakes you've made, guess what? You're reinforcing that you're very good at making financial mistakes. You will continue to make more and more of those, right? So when people have that realization, it's like a light switch. It kind of gets flipped, and they're like, oh my gosh, like I've been literally creating my own reality through these rituals. Let me change that and flip those backwards. And then they start to really quickly see the opposite happen. They start to see that they're making smarter financial decisions. They start to see that their debt is not the end of the world, that they've actually done way more things right in their financial life than wrong.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You know, when I used to have job interviews with people, it was so interesting how you could really see how they might be great, and suddenly we come to the salary discussion and it gets so awkward. And then some people suddenly they're like looking down, then they are ashamed, or they are pretending to be cocky, you know, like there's just like the energy shifts. You can be on a Zoom call and the energy still shifts like crazy. You don't even have to be in the same room together. And there is like so much shame, and I definitely see the shame more connected to women. And they would literally be asking me for like 40% less than a guy in the same situation, even maybe less skilled, would ask. Why do you feel like women particularly have so much shame around money?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, if money equals power, and we know that to be true, whether we want to believe, whether that's ideal or not, it is the fact, money equals power. Why? I think in history, we have not wanted women to have money because we have not wanted women to have power, right? And so, you know, it was only a few years before I was born that women could have their own credit cards in the United States. I mean, that blows my mind, you know. So how do you keep a group of people from getting more power by way of getting more money? Is to load them with a ton of shame around it. And I still see it happen today, and I even see it happen with some women coaches, money coaches. One of the things I hate is this phrase, live within your means. And I see that getting thrown at women left and right. And it drives me crazy because live within your means. The intent there is to say, don't spend more money than you have.
Sure.
Okay, got it. Everybody knows that. If you know basic math, you know that if I only have $10, I should not spend 20. We don't need to be preached that. But here's the part people don't say is maybe your means are not enough. Maybe instead of focusing on trying to live within your means and scale back your life and not have the things and experiences that you wholeheartedly want, maybe you should go and try to get more money, right? And so we're constantly preaching to people that you need to live within your means. And we're not ever saying, I never hear anyone say, if you're struggling to live within your means are not enough for you. And here's why. Women are not being paid equal. Like, women don't get promoted at the same rate. Women don't have the same opportunities, blah, blah, blah. Women are not encouraged to negotiate their salaries, like things like that. Like, and so we're still perpetuating that idea that women need to stay small, scale back their spending, don't be, irresponsible with your money, instead of telling them, like, actually, no, the problem is not your spending. The problem is you're not being paid enough. And my perspective and what I coach my clients on is, if your vision is huge, I want you to make sure that you have the ability to bring in the amount of money to afford that vision. We're not going to compromise the vision, because you're working some job that isn't paying you what you're worth, which is a tricky concept in and of itself. In my opinion, what you're worth is, what is the vision for your life? The vision for my life is what I'm worth. I'm worth having that vision, and I'm worth getting paid enough money to make that vision come to fruition. Sure. And so when I talked about those painless trade-offs earlier, the trade-off is not, well, I know you'd like to have a house, but your cash flow says you can't have one. That's not the trade-off. The trade-off is, you're going to get that house, but we're going to have to work with the top side of the income statement, which is how much money you're bringing in. We're not just going to fixate on where you can trim and scrimp and save and eat beans and rice and that nonsense. But let's talk about the real issue here, is the numbers aren't working because the numbers coming in aren't big enough. So.
And even at the beginning of this little beautiful rant, when you when you mentioned the part of money is power, it can sound so negative, but I fully agree with it. But I actually see it in a positive way, right? Because you can spread the money, right? It's beautiful to have it. And it took me a while to actually get to this, right? Even though actually, no, I always, thanks to my dad, I have to say, thank you, Dad. I did have that in me, that he was always like, no, the money comes and then you're going to pass it over to somebody else. You need to pay people and so on. I didn't have the same mindset from my mom. So there was always even this like constant battle in the house, like in the minds, right? And then it's so interesting how you might have a point of view of you want to pay somebody, right? Whether it is even your employees, you want to pay for someone else's service, or you want to tip a waiter, whatever it is, because then you understand that you just send more of the energy into the whole flow in the world. And it's just such a beautiful thing. And yes, so you can have more power. So next time when you are on a job interview and you have already worked with Jenny, and you know that you need to get more money in your pocket, don't only think about, am I worthy enough to ask for this? Because then you can take your kids for dinner outside, you're going to make their childhood more beautiful, and you're going to tip that waiter, and then that waiter can take their kids somewhere. And it's just such a beautiful flow when you think about it from this point of view.
And you're chipping away at the inequality there between pay. Every woman that negotiates her salary, that goes back and pushes for that raise, is chipping away at that gap. And the gap is not going to vanish by us waiting for employers to do it, waiting for men to negotiate less. The gap is going to minimize from us each individually taking action. And what I love about it is that when women can get utterly obsessed with the vision for their life, they become so confident and so just so like, it's so critical for them to make sure that all the other elements of their life line up with that vision. And career and compensation is one of the most important pieces there that has to align with that vision.
For sure. And then also like supportive environment overall.
Yeah.
Suddenly when you start empowering yourself, you realize, oh, who actually around me wants me to be empowered. That's also interesting one.
Yeah, that's actually one of the parts of my program towards the tail end is, in terms of maintaining all the progress that you've made and maintaining that momentum, is really stepping back and looking at your environment and looking at, the people that you're interacting with. If they have a scarcity mindset, they're going to try, not intentionally, but they're going to try to suck you back into believing those things because they're so rooted in those beliefs. And so you do have to distance yourself to some extent from people that aren't ready for the transformation that you've already had.
Yeah.
But what happens there is that once you have an abundance mindset and you're all of a sudden not living small anymore, and you're aware that there's infinite opportunities for you to make money, to have experiences, etc., people start to be magnetically drawn to you. And it's, I can't explain it, and I don't want to sound too like magical thinking here, but like maybe those people were there all along, but because you were so small, you couldn't actually see them. But once you open yourself up to opportunities, you start to realize that people come into your life that are exactly who you need at that moment in time. Opportunities present themselves. You know, when I did this work, I started to see tons of opportunities open up for me. And out of the blue, I got job offers that I didn't even go after. Companies approached me, and, you know, I would set this financial goal for myself. And then I'd think, all right, how am I going to get my compensation up to that level? How am I going to achieve that goal? And then voila, in a couple of weeks, a company would come knocking and the salary was exactly what I was looking for. Now, maybe that would have happened anyway, but I wasn't in the right mindset. I probably would have ignored the email, right?
Yes.
Yeah. It's funny. I had this experience that I often tell my clients about, which is I was one of the first big investments I made in myself several years ago was I wanted to go to a meditation retreat with Deepak Chopra, and it was going to cost, I don't know, somewhere around $4,000 or more to go and to pay for the airplane and the hotel and everything. And I felt so guilty about spending that kind of money on myself. Like, I was like, this is crazy. I have a child. Like, what am I doing? This should be going into his college fund. Like, who am I to go spend this kind of money on myself? And I remember I was standing in my old house when you walked in the front door, there was like the banister there for the stairwell. And I was standing right there at the banister, and I was on my phone, and I was reading an email about the retreat, and I was debating whether I should do it or not. And then I also had an email from a charitable organization that I had given money to in the past. And I'm standing there and I'm thinking, do I go on this retreat, or should I give money to this charity? I don't know. Maybe I can do both. I don't know. I'll keep thinking about the retreat. So I'm standing there at my front door, and I'm decide to give money to the charity. So I'm plugging in my PayPal account or whatever to give the money. And the mail chute on my door opens up, and my mailman, I used to have 2 dogs that would try to bite the mailman. So he would push the mail through really, really fast, like just shoot it through the mail chute. Mail flies through my door. I bend down, I reach down to pick it up, and I open it, and there's a property tax refund in almost the exact amount of the retreat. And coincidence? Maybe. I had no idea this refund was coming to me. But at that moment, that I felt confident to go on that retreat, but I also understood that when it reinforced a belief that I had at that time and that moment forgotten, which is when you give, you get. And one of the rituals that I try to impress upon my clients is to be generous. Often, if you have a scarcity mindset, you think, I don't have anything to give.
Yeah.
I can maybe go volunteer some time, but that's it. I don't have any money to give. I don't have any things to give. If you can find something of value to give, money or, an old handbag that you're not using anymore or something, give something away and then just step back and watch what happens. Inevitably, some good will come to you. It might not be monetary. It might not be a check being pushed through your door, but some benefit will come back to you relatively quickly. And so that's one of the money rituals that I impress upon my clients is get into the mode of giving. For me personally, I started small with giving to a few charities, a couple dollars a month that I was interested in. And then that grew over time. And then it grew to like picking one charity, giving to a bunch of charities every month, but then picking one charity that was special for that month and giving them even more money. Fast forward, after my bills and my food, charitable donations is the 3rd highest category of spend for me in a month.
That's amazing.
And I didn't go broke giving to charities. In fact, it was the opposite, right? More financial abundance came to me the more I gave.
I would just like add one thing to that because it's so interesting. Like when you speak, I'm like, yes, I was going through the processes too during my deconditioning phase. And even I would say one thing that this is something even when it comes to law of attraction, right? We hear stuff like that. And then when I see a lot of people, and I definitely felt it a little bit inside, that you feel like, okay, I need to give to get. So I'm gonna give. And then you kind of like start peeking. Like, when is this finally going to come to me? Right. So just to make
Mhm.
sure that we are giving unconditionally.
Exactly. Yeah,
Because otherwise
exactly.
it's not really an act of giving. It's still a transaction, right? We are still
Yeah.
waiting with our
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah. I mean, that's, that concept of detachment is one of the hardest ones for people to grasp, which is even, you know, give something, be detached. Don't be so fixated that I've got to get something back, right? Like stand back and watch what happens, but don't be so attached to it that you then start to create negative thoughts around what didn't happen.
Mm.
And the same thing goes for goals, which is a really hard concept for people to grasp, because we go through this process and we say, okay, you need to save $50,000 to put on a down payment towards a home, but be detached from that. Well, what does that mean? Like, I'm still saving for the 50,000. Be detached, because if you're so obsessed, so stuck on this goal being exactly the way it is, some other opportunity may present itself that's better. It's the whole idea of, even the law of attraction is like, ask for something or better. I
Mm-hmm,
would like,
mm-hmm.
$100,000 or more. Like, that's the idea around detachment. It's really hard for people to grasp that, because you become obsessed with your vision. You have these tangible achievable, measurable goals you're working towards, but then now you're telling me to also be detached from the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that you don't care or you take a careless approach to any of this, but it just means that you stay aware and open to opportunities that may come in and turn all this on its head,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because it's something bigger and better.
Right. And even like when it comes to painting the vision, I noticed that there are people who, the more concrete and detailed they are in their vision, the easier it is for them to just embody it and visualize it. And then there's the other type, where actually I am, where I want to get concrete in the vision, but in the feeling of it, like, right, how am I feeling in it? And not that it needs to be 5K by the 5th of March. That stresses me out. That
Yeah.
makes me feel attached to it, and that makes me feel like a failure if I'm not going to achieve it. But getting into the feeling of abundance, and how am I going to feel, like what it feels like to live by the beach, all of these things, and then like my life suddenly really, like, there's a magic wand, and then stuff starts happening when I do it this way.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of blend those two together. Like, I completely agree with you. It's the feeling that matters more than the tangible details, right? Like, because if you can feel like you already own that home, or you already live on the beach, or you already, are planning that trip to Europe or wherever, if you can have that feeling, you're going to maintain your momentum in working towards making that happen, right? From a financial planning piece of it, though, feeling like you have $100,000 without knowing what the steps you need to take, it gets a little tricky. And I think that's where people get confused about the idea of manifestation. That manifestation is not just thinking a thought and, oh, I'd like to have ice cream, and I walk outside my door and there's an ice cream man. Like manifestation is like, I feel like I already have the ice cream, and because I feel like that, I'm now taking steps to like walk around the block to get one, right? And so there's an element of action in manifestation that I think some people aren't aware of, and so then they're like, well, manifestation didn't work for me. So when it comes to financial planning, it's, yes, part of when we have that vision, we do chunk it down into goals, and we run the numbers and figure out how much those goals are going to cost, right? But before we actually do that piece of the part, I have my clients write out their intention statements, because having an intention, having a statement that expresses how you will be. So, like, for example, if a client if they have a goal of being debt free, that's important to them, and that's the vision they have, is to have that what they define as financial freedom from debt. The intention is, I feel unburdened by my debt. I feel like I am making progress towards being debt free. It's all about feelings. It's all about how you will feel now, not I will feel burdened by my debt until it's gone. Because if you feel burdened by something until you achieve it, you won't achieve it. You have to feel debt free now, even if your if your credit card statement says something else, you have to feel it now, right? In order to keep that momentum to propel you and drive you forward to taking the right actions, right? So it isn't, I don't coach my clients just to feel that way. I coach them feel that way so that you generate the momentum to then follow through on this plan we've laid out for you.
Right. I love the take on it. That's great. Let's say that somebody right now was listening, is like, okay, I'm realizing that I have work to do. What would you say it's kind of some maybe like first steps towards better abundant mindset, let's say?
I think the first step in any sort of transformation, whether it's around money or anything else, is awareness. So, being aware that your thoughts and beliefs aren't actually who you are, and detaching from them. And the best tool to do that is meditation. And a lot of people, a lot of my clients are new to meditation. And when they start doing it, they're like, oh, I'm sitting there and I'm just thinking all these thoughts are popping in my head and I can't concentrate. That means it's working. If you're aware that you're sitting there and you're aware of these thoughts, running through your mind, then you're starting to be aware. You're getting exactly what you're supposed to out of the experience. And so first, being aware that the thoughts are not you. Oftentimes they're not intentionally created by you, and recognizing that they're just mental chatter. And most of the time they're nonsense. And having that awareness, that realization is the first step, because so long as you believe that your thoughts and your beliefs are you, who you are, you won't take the necessary action to change them, because that would be changing you. So you have to have that detachment, that separation there between yourself and your thoughts. And then you can start to, I do a little reflection work with my clients on understanding where those thoughts came from, but I don't do a ton of it because I don't think there's a lot of value in diving way back into your life story to figure out like where that, it's important to understand, like, I'm eating all the food on my plate because I was told as a child not to waste food. Fine. But I don't need to go deeper into that and like bring up a whole bunch of emotions around my childhood. I just need to acknowledge that this thought resulted from something way, way, way back when. And then quickly shift to, if this thought is nonsense, what is the truth here? The truth is that whether I eat all the food on my plate or not, there's still enough food for me. That I won't not have food tomorrow. That, I'm blessed and I'm grateful that I have a fridge full of food. I don't need to eat everything on my plate. And so you start to then shift really quickly into what's the truth here and how can I turn that belief upside down and rewrite that script. And then, I may have mentioned this earlier, but your thoughts become your beliefs because you repeat them over and over and over again. And so this is where affirmations come into play, which feel kind of silly, when you start repeating statements to yourself that you don't wholeheartedly believe today, and you start repeating them over and over, you might feel kind of silly at the start, but that's what you've got to do, is rework your neural pathways in your mind. And I won't go into the science of all of this, but all those negative thoughts that you repeated for years and years and years carved pathways in your mind that then drive your behavior and got stronger and stronger over time. You gotta rework those. And the only way to rework those is to start repeating better thoughts. And it feels silly at first. And then eventually you don't need to even notice that you're doing affirmations, because those thoughts become the mental chatter that you now have. Which you always have mental chatter. It's just the quality of the chatter varies, right? So you use those affirmations every day. And I have this awesome app that I found called Why Vision Board, which I love. And it will pop your affirmations up on your phone throughout the day. So every time you look at your phone, which people do all day, every day, you can see your affirmation right there. And then eventually you don't need the app, because the affirmation is like a core belief of yours. So those are the first steps. But oftentimes people give up pretty quickly in that process because they either go too deep into the self-reflection and they really start to surface things that they then need support in dealing with. So they abandon the whole thing, or they feel like the affirmations are silly and they don't think they're getting they're having any tangible success fast enough. And so then they abandon that process. And this is where coaching and that whole accountability piece I mentioned earlier really comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Then let's continue with that. If somebody right now is listening and is thinking like, I need her, where can they find you and how could they possibly work with you?
Yeah. So I do one-on-one coaching. My platform is called blissandwealth.com. And I am launching a course. It'll launch next week that follows my whole program, that 3-phase program I described earlier, but allows somebody to do it for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's an intensive program. It is not a finance 101 class or a money mindset 101 class. It is an intensive transformation over 8 to 10 weeks. And there's a lot of work to be done. But if you want to radically change your life, you have to be willing to put in the time and the effort, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I see is that my clients usually are exhausted by the time they come to me because they've turned to TikTok and YouTube and all these things to get these quick fixes. When you can't quick fix this kind of situation, you've got to do the deep inner work, and then you've got to do the outer work. And that's what my program takes you through. So that will launch next week on my platform, blissandwealth.com. And then my coaching follows the same program, but with more individualized support.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said earlier, I modify the program to meet someone where they are. So if you want also an accountability partner, then the coaching program is probably the best for you. And it's an 8-session program.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was so great. Honestly, I feel like there was so much value and really the stuff that you were sharing here with us today. So thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I'm going to make sure I'm also going to link your social media in the show notes. I know that you're active on LinkedIn. Are you also active on different platforms, or is it just LinkedIn for you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram, but I'm majority on LinkedIn because I like the way that my message is very hard to convey in a small graphic.
Yeah.
And so my content is more in depth, and LinkedIn is, in my opinion, right now the best platform for that.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you so much again for coming on here.
Yeah. Sure thing. Thank you so much. It was such a joy.